There is only one approved Marian apparition site in the United States, and it's in Champion, Wisconsin. We have a treasure in our own backyard. And I was able to go there, and it's a treasure. I want to tell you about it. The story revolves around a young woman named Adele Bryce. Adele, her backstory makes this even more important because she was born in Belgium, and as she grew, she was born in 1831, so that gives you a context. And as she grew up, she felt the call to become a religious sister. She had some friends, her companions, who also, those were on the same track, and they had their plans. They were going to do that. But then her family announced that they were going to immigrate to the United States. And Adele, she's a young woman at this point. She's got to make a decision. And so she consults her priest, and he says to her, Adele, if the Lord wants you to be a sister, you will be a sister. Go with your family, immigrate to the United States. Well, that was like telling her it was never going to happen, because they get to New York, they make their way to the Green Bay, Wisconsin area, and it's a wild country. The religious needs of people, the spiritual needs, are not even being close to being met. Children are growing up without the sacraments or knowing about Jesus. It's really difficult. So where is she supposed to get an education or to learn to be a sister, to go to live in community, to do all this? There's nowhere. There's nothing like that at all. It's just kind of wild. And so I guess that's a step of faith, because with God, all things are possible. So that seemed impossible, but if he wants her to be a sister, he'll make it happen. She leaves. She goes with her family. They come to the United States, and they become farmers. They purchase some land and they become farmers. Well, one day when Adele was, I think, around 24 years old, a young woman, she's walking to the mill with some grain to have it ground, and this beautiful lady appears, and she's dressed in white. She has a yellow sash. She has long blonde hair, a veil, and she just disappears. So Adele told her family all about it, and didn't know what to think about it. Well, a while later it happened again. This time her sister was with her and a neighbor girl. And the apparition appeared, the beautiful lady, no words were said, she disappeared. And that was the end of it. So Adele goes to the priest. She finds a priest and she goes to him and she confides what happened. And he gives her some advice. He says, Adele, if you see this apparition again, say this: in God's name, who are you and what do you want of me? And so she's walking from Mass one day with her sister and a neighbor girl. And the apparition appears. And so Adele gets on her knees and she says, in God's name, who are you and what do you want of me? And her sister and the girl are like, we don't see anything, whatever. And Mary answers her, and I want to read Mary's words. I am the Queen of Heaven, who prays for the conversion of sinners, and I wish you to do the same. You received Holy Communion this morning, and that is well. But you must do more. Make a general confession and offer communion for the conversion of sinners. If they do not convert and do penance, my son will be obliged to punish them. And that's when Adele tells her friends, get on your knees. It's the Queen of Heaven. Then Mary asks her a question, and it's a question that just struck Adele in the heart. Like, she teared up to answer and ask about it. This is what she said: what are you doing here in idleness while your companions are working in the vineyard of my son? And I think I could be wrong, but the companions working in the vineyard of my son are her friends back in Belgium, that they wanted to work in the vineyard. They wanted to convert sinners. They are sisters, and she's not. And so this just strikes Adele at the heart. And so she's teary-eyed, and she feels like, what can I possibly do? And she says, what more can I do, dear lady? And Mary answered her. This is so good. It's so simple. Gather the children in this wild country and teach them what they should know for salvation. But how shall I teach them who know so little myself? Our Lady, with this heart full of love, says to Adele, teach them their catechism, how to sign themselves with the sign of the cross, and how to approach the sacraments. That is what I wish you to do. And then she says this, and this is very important because the story gets dangerous and it gets exciting. Go and fear nothing, I will help you. Wow. So Adele, she does. She starts going. She takes it's like, it doesn't matter about the weather. Wisconsin's got some severe weather. It doesn't matter the weather, the wild animals. There were lots of wild animals. There were bear and wolves. It didn't matter. She went. She went to all the homes. She was teaching the children. She took Mary's mission so seriously that she would even tell the frontier wives, I'll clean your house. I'll do your chores if you let me teach your children. She just took it to heart and just would not be deterred, would not be stopped. Now, there's another thing about Adele that you probably don't know, is that she was blind in one eye because of an accident when she was a child. So she had a disadvantage traveling. I mean, if you have one eye and you're looking out for wild animals and things, you could be blind swiped or whatever. I mean, she did have a disadvantage, but she knew enough. She could teach them their catechism. She could teach them how to sign themselves, and she could teach them the necessary things for salvation. And any of us can do that too. So she gives her this very simple job. So anyway, as it turns out, Adele gets the support of her father, who builds a chapel, and the support of the local priest. And so, some people made fun of her. They didn't believe her. Some people believed her, but she did. She did all this traveling and she did this catechism for the children, and it drew others to her who joined her. And so they made an order and they wore habits. And then they had this like 50-mile radius they were covering to educate all these children. It eventually becomes a school and a boarding house school, and just doesn't charge hardly anything at all, so that the poorest of the poor children could attend school and be boarded there if they needed to. And so she was able to fulfill that promise. But that is not the end of the story. This is so exciting about this story. So remember what Our Lady said to her: go and fear nothing, I will help you. So she was fearless. She was just fearless in the way she would evangelize. She didn't fear anything: rejection, wild animals, weather, bad shoes, her blind eye, sickness, whatever. She didn't fear a thing. She just went. There were fires going all over the Midwest in 1871, and they started on October 8th, and that included Wisconsin and the Green Bay area. There had been a drought, and it was, you think of the Midwest, it's always, everything's always green because it rains all the time. But they had a severe drought, and there was this horrible fire. And this area where Adele was with the chapel that her dad had built, and this ground that had been consecrated to Our Lady and educating the children, the people all ran there. There was no escaping this fire. They brought their animals in front of them. They raced there, and Adele remembered that she didn't have anything to fear, that Mary would be with her. So she goes into the chapel. All these people, they crowd into the chapel. Their animals are outside, and they're praying and they're praying. And then finally, they decide that they're gonna, the parameter, it's 6 acres, I believe. So the parameter of the 6-acre consecrated land, they take the statue out of the church, and they process. And they do this all night long. And just when like the wind's gonna blow the smoke and asphyxiate them because the fire's right there, it shifts a little bit so that everyone can breathe, and they just do this. They do this praying and this marching. And there's fences there. Now those fences have been replaced, but the fire never crossed the boundary of the 6 acres. Everything else is decimated. But the people and the animals who are there, their livelihood, it doesn't cross. And the fence is on one side not burned, on the outside charred and burned. It was like Our Lady made a line. And it was just like they just kept marching and praying, and it was pretty desperate because the fire was all around them, and if it crossed the line, there was nowhere to go. You couldn't run away through the fire. I mean, they would have all died. So that's what they did. And then October 9th, in the early morning hours, because they're marching all night long and praying, in the early morning hours of October 9th, the rain fell and it put out all the fires. And I had the opportunity to go there, and I visited the grave of Adele. I went through the little museum. The national shrine of Our Lady of Champion is humble, smaller than most churches. You can go down below, it's actual apparition site, and light a candle and pray right there at the site where Mary had appeared to Adele. I received grace there. I saw crutches on the wall, people who've been healed. This is a Marian apparition site. It's very holy ground. And I saw the fence that has been replaced. They showed the fence line and everything. A lot of people don't have the money to go overseas or get on a plane and fly all over the place to go to a Marian apparition site. We've got one right here in Champion, Wisconsin. And I tell you, I've been to a few places in my life, and this one touched me in a sweet way. I felt Mary's touch. I believe I received some kind of a interior healing of some wounds. I can't even explain it, but it was a beautiful experience. And I believe with my whole heart that she appeared there. And this treasure of the church, it's right in our backyard. So I encourage you to make a trip. And I'll tell you something else. I didn't know the story. And when my husband and I arrived there, it was October 8th, the day of the fire. I'm like, this was the day of the fire. Tonight, after midnight sometime, the rain's gonna start falling, and that's the day the fire was put out. I mean, I couldn't have timed it. It was really quite a thing. Our Lady of Champion, pray for us.